Hello, this is Dr. RJ and I wanted to talk to you about an issue that's current because of the recent pandemic that we just went through, and that's the chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, I have had patients in my practice who had so much fatigue that they actually wound up going on disability. Um, they were so exhausted by even mild amounts of activity that they weren't able to go back to their job that they had left after the infection came. Um, and this virus unfortunately affected a lot of people in a long-term way, and left them with problems such as this chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, it's been very hard, I think, for a lot of people with this pandemic virus. Some people had brain cloud issues that persisted. Other people had, physical or medical problems that persisted. Um, but today I want to talk about chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, chronic fatigue syndrome is a syndrome where people will have difficulty with fatigue that lasts a long time. And definitely it can be related to certain viruses. Um, uh, in the older times, we had the mononucleosis virus, and sometimes people who got mononucleosis would develop a chronic fatigue syndrome afterwards. Um, there are also certain bacteria can do this too, um, uh, so that the bacteria can cause an infection, and then after the infection, people develop a chronic fatigue type syndrome. Um, so uh, uh, what we do now with this chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, So this has been researched. And one of the problems that we have with chronic fatigue syndrome is that we don't know what's actually causing the fatigue. When people look at people who have chronic fatigue, it's very difficult to figure out what is causing their problem. And so it's easy for people to say, oh, well, it's all about depression. If these people would just quit being depressed, then their fatigue would go away. Unfortunately, they've documented this chronic fatigue syndrome in people who came back from the war in Iraq. Now with the pandemic, there's so many people with chronic fatigue that it's hard for people to just kind of dismiss it away and say it's all about depression. Um, my guess is that chronic fatigue syndrome has something to do with an organelle inside the cell called the mitochondria. The mitochondria are little organelles in our cell that we probably borrowed from another cell in long distance past. Um, the mitochondria are kind of like the chloroplasts that are in a plant cell, which give energy to the plant cell. The mitochondria give us energy. Um, so basically, uh, when our cells need energy, we shoot fats and sugars into these mitochondria, and they power the energy system of the cell. Um, uh, to see how important this energy system is, one of the tissues that has a great number of mitochondria is the muscle cell. Um, since the muscle cell needs energy and needs energy on a constant basis, um, uh, the muscle cell has a lot of mitochondria um, uh, to feed it the energy. My feeling is that probably some of these mitochondria get damaged because of the virus, And that is why people develop this fatigue syndrome. Some people are able to recover by making new mitochondria, but some people are not able to do that quickly, and so they get this chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, uh, I have to admit that years ago, I had the chronic fatigue syndrome. One of the things that I noticed when I had the chronic fatigue was that if I tried to do too much, I paid for it. Um, so, I was a runner at the time, and if I ran every other day, I really had no problem. As long as I rested, I could come back and run the next day. But if I tried to run, let's just say 3 or 4 days in a row, I would develop the chronic fatigue syndrome. And then I couldn't run for maybe 4 or 5 days after that. Um, I was just too tired to go out there and do much of anything. Um, I was just exhausted when I tried to go out and run on the next day. So I found that I had to kind of like meter out the amount of running I did. And so what I would say is that it was kind of like putting money in the bank. Um, you couldn't take the money out faster than you put it in. So basically, you had to take care of yourself and take the energy out slowly over time. But if you tried to push it, in my case, if I tried to do, let's just say, a lot of interval training for days in a row, um, you're going to exhaust your supply of energy in the bank, and you're going to wind up with this chronic fatigue. Um, I just learned basically that I had to kind of meter out the amount of energy I had and make sure that I put in plenty of energy with good quality food, plenty of water, and plenty of rest. So that's what I think people with the chronic fatigue syndrome are going to have to do. They're going to have to get lots of rest. They're going to have to eat quality food. Um, Avoid things that take our energy away, like alcohol and cigarettes. Um, Avoid things that they think are going to give you energy, like energy drinks, because those are just giving you fake energy. And basically take care of yourself. And also, it's important to get a little exercise. What researchers have found is that people with chronic fatigue syndrome can get better by adding in some mild exercise and to slowly increase the amount of that exercise slowly over time. That's the only thing that's been proven to work with chronic fatigue syndrome. Everything else you may have heard about um, is only experimental. Um, Now, for experimental things that I might want to mention, there are two supplements that have been studied. I can't say that they're proven, but they've been studied. One is called alpha lipoic acid, and the other one is called acetyl-carnitine. Now, these are two supplements that help us to make new mitochondria. Since I believe the mitochondria are involved, by making more mitochondria and newer ones, it helps to replace the ones that have been damaged by the virus. So that's my take on this. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Research will kind of help to prove the case one way or the other. All right, take care, guys. Have a good day.